Welcome to all of you, especially you Hyatts people that are chatting with. Most of you probably know Sherry Carmichael. If not, this is Sherry. Some
That's
months
scary.
ago, I think it was several months ago, we were planning the programs for the year, and Sherry said, you know, I'd like to do something about Hyatts. So we all said, go for it. So here we are tonight. So Sherry will tell us.
Thank you,
about it.
Linda.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would like.
Let me interrupt a minute. And
Oh, sure.
I'm going to pass around a little sign-up sheet for your name and your email if you have it, if we don't already have it.
I just would like to say about having a program on Hyatts. We're the Powell-Liberty Historical Society, and Hyatts is part of Liberty. Even though we are here in Powell with the house and everything, we represent Hyatts as well. I am so pleased with the full house. I hope you all just, enjoy the close fellowship, not be too upset about it. But at any rate, I was saying that I think we have somewhat overlooked Hyatts in the past, and my father-in-law lives in the two-story brick house in Hyatts that was owned by or built by Mr. Hyatt. And therefore, my husband came in 1957 when he was in the 7th grade and lived there, and all of his sisters and brother and everything. And I was interviewing him last fall about the house, and I thought, I ought to do some research here about the town and put together a program. So that's where it's come from. And there's a total disclaimer here. We're nearly 200 years away from the beginning of all this, and it's a little hard to know exactly. I've done a lot of research, and just so that you know that I didn't make any of this up, the credits that you usually have at the end of the program, I'm going to read to you now. These are the sources that I used: documents from the Delaware County Record Center, the 1880 History of Delaware County, Ancestry.com, early Liberty Township maps, early Township trustee documents, 1931 History of Hyatts written by school children from the Hyatts School. Actually, there's a lot of information in that, much closer to it than we are today. Photos and records from our files here at the Powell-Liberty Historical Society. Recorded interviews with folks from Hyatts. We've interviewed the Kermodes, long-standing family there, the Rutherfords before they passed on, and Louise Pyatt, and we had some other written interviews, and also written newspaper articles on the history of Hyatts. So those are my sources. Don't throw apples at me or rotten tomatoes or anything if you think I'm wrong about this stuff. Okay, so I guess we're ready to begin. And we're going to talk about the history of Hyattsville. You see it either way in all the documents. Don't know exactly how he wanted it stated in the beginning. I believe it was really Hyattville, but it is also transcribed as Hyattsville a lot of times. It is said that many small towns across America owe their existence to the coming of the railroad. This is indeed a true statement concerning the town of Hyattsville, located in Liberty Township in southern Delaware County, Ohio. In 1874, surveys were made through the area of southern Delaware County by the Columbus, Hocking Valley, and Toledo Railroad Company, with the primary purpose of transporting coal. With work beginning on the line in 1875, Henry A. Hyatt drew and submitted a town plat which consisted of 32-acre lots situated directly east of the railroad, which he offered for $80 a lot. And this was recorded on May 8, 1876. Thereby, he became the founder of Hyattsville. Okay? Next one, please. The railroad street, or I should say Railroad Street, and I don't know if you can see that or not. Railroad Street bordered the tracks running north and south, right there. I lost my place. And Center Street ran between lots 5 and 6, 16 and 17, 27 and 28. The eastern edge of the town was bordered by a trail known as Delaware Street. It would end up becoming Liberty Road. That led south to the town of Powell and north to the town of Delaware. Hack Street ran the southern border from the railroad to Delaware Street. Okay? As the railroad was the main reason for the existence of the town, Mr. Hyatt immediately began construction of all things pertaining to a water station. At his own expense, a grain house doubling as the first depot was built on the east side of the tracks west of Railroad Street. Could we go back one? Because I think this shows the depot street right there on the east side of the railroad. And I will say at this point that I believe that perhaps his home was on lot 32 right across from there originally, that his first home was. I don't know that for sure, except from the things that I have read. He built the depot directly across from his home. Okay? So, at his own expense, a grain warehouse, doubling as the first depot, was built on the east side of the tracks, west of the railroad street, and across from lot 32. There he filled his role as station agent, as well as grain merchant. And by 1877, one end of the building was designated as a post office. So Hyatts had their own post office at one time, and Mr. Hyatt filled the position as postmaster as well. Okay. As the only water station between Columbus and Prospect, Ohio, a water tower, pump house, and 2 pools were dug. Now, I love this picture. You probably see the one gentleman there, but did you notice one up here? All the way on the top. Okay. A 2-acre, 12-foot deep pond or pool was excavated on the east side of the tracks by 30 men. An ice house was built near the pump house, north of the depot, where the men who worked there received 50 cents per day. And in 1877, Mr. Hyatt added 200 fish to the pool. Later, a second pool was dug, located on the west side of the tracks. And I have to tell you that my mother, as a little girl, remembers her father taking her fishing in that pool on the west side of the railroad tracks, which is now located on the Kermode property. Okay.
Sherry?
Yes.
What kind of fish?
I honestly don't. Bluegill, okay? and small bass, smallmouth bass.
Carp and bass.
Yeah, carp. Yeah, no, I don't know.
I'm just curious. Thank you.
You're welcome. Later, a second pool was dug, located on the west side of the tracks, and the water tower was filled with Excelsior, you tried that, and lime to soften the water that filled the train's engines to keep their boilers from the mineral buildup. It is recorded that operators of the water station included Mr. Hyatt, of course, Mr. Knowles, and a Clayton Patton. Ed Reuter and Jay Zimmerman are 2 names mentioned as area men who ran the trains on this line. And it took 2 men to fill the trains from the pool and water tower, which were located at the north edge of the village. The first traffic on the lines was in the fall of 1876. They made tracks. Okay? The new town needed some residents, and I have to insert here some publicity that went out for this new town of Hyatts. It was in the Delaware Herald of March 24th, 1876, and it says, it glowingly reports the advantages of Hyattville. It says, young man, Hyattville, on the Columbus and Toledo Railroad offers you opportunities exceeding your highest dreams. The town plat is laid out into quarter lots, some of which have already been sold. A commodious warehouse is now being erected for the accommodation of freight. For the present, there will be a room in it for the convenience of passengers to and from town. Great inducements are offered to the different trades. Young men will do well not to waste any more time in buggy riding and moonlight rambles, but talk business and have the squire or parson make out the papers and begin life in earnest in Hyattsville with a reasonable amount of assurance that the future has in store for your success. Hyattsville is a water station and destined to spring up like a mushroom, as it were, in the night. It is also the nearest point by which the state reform school for girls can be reached. Now, if anybody doesn't know where that was, it was across the Scioto River. It later became the industrial school for girls, and then later boys were added to it. And I will make a point here that they weren't all bad girls. Some of them just needed a home. When my mother was born, my grandmother was crippled and in a wheelchair, had to go into a wheelchair, and she needed help with my mother. And it is said that they had help from girls from the reform school there, okay? This noted school is but 3 miles distant from the station, and the number of visitors, now large, will undoubtedly be doubled owing to the better facilities for reaching it. The citizens of Liberty cannot fail to see the advantages to be derived from this new town. A good store on the corner of Main Street and Tradesman's Avenue. And if you noticed on the map before, I didn't see Tradesman's Avenue, so.
It's along the railroad.
It was.
One along the railroad.
Oh, she knows because she used to live there. Okay, thank you.
And I owned the grocery store for a long time.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you later. Okay. With the post office next door and the hardware emporium across the street, it will save many a journey through the mud and the necessity of a gravel road to Delaware, as well as many precious hours of time. Time is money. Consequently, many dollars is money. A good market will be secured at home for the products of the dairy and the poultry yard, and good bargains in this said store, as well as Glover's and SP Schurz, with pinbacks and other novelties in the latest fashion upstairs. For particulars, address H.A. Hyatt, Post Office Box 511. So here,
What year is this photo then?
turn of the century.
The school, I was thinking the new school was built in the 1920s.
It was 1915, so
Why,
it's
1915?
it is before the new school.
Before the new.
Yeah, and I will point out information about Redmond's Lodge and the school and the church.
So what's Main Street today or not existent?
It's still Main Street, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still Main Street.
Pardon?
It is still.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Liberty Road?
There by the school.
Liberty Road would run this way. On this side of the school and on that side of the church. Okay? All right, so these are listed as early owners of the homes. I don't know any of these names. Maybe some of you would recognize some. George Collins, Corey Hardin, well, Hardin from Hardin Lane. Mr. McCleary, I had a Mr. McCleary that was my school bus driver a long time ago. Banner Pool, the Pools, yeah. Cyrus Chambers, Jacob Swartz, Grandpa, right, to this gentleman here. Clifford Blaney, Mr. Houston, Mr. Hyatt, of course, and Mr. Barton. But here it says, the first birth in the newly developed town is recorded as a son to Mr. and Mrs. Ed Sinke. That was also in the paper. Next one, please. By May 17th of 1879, Hyatt decided, Hyatt decided to expand the town. And he drew an addition of 15 lots and 3 outlots on the west side of the railroad tracks, which was platted and recorded at that time. The street on the west side of the tracks, running north and south, was called C&O Street, which it still is today. And High Street divided the lots 33, 34, 35, 36, and 37, as you see on here, from lots 38, 39, 40, and 41, 42, running east and west. And Hack Street, which was on the east side of the tracks, became South Street on the west side of the tracks, which ran east and west at the edge of the addition. Next one, please. All towns are incomplete without a church and school. And so in 1875, a 4.5-acre site on the east side of today's Liberty Road at the intersection with Hyatts Road was dedicated as a school lot. The first school was designated as Liberty Township School Number 6. Of course, these were one-room schools. By 1915, a new large school was building, housing all 12 grades, replaced the one-room school and resulted in the consolidation of 7 other Liberty Township one-room schools. And I've listed them there. There was, here are the 11 one-room schools that were in all of Liberty Township. And then these are the 7 underneath there. Number 7 was Boardman. Number 4 was Liberty. Number 11 was Chickahominy. Number 2 was Williams, which was also known as Collins or Case. Also the Pioneer Beaver School, which was across the river. Number 10, Patton, and number 5, Tone Schools. Now, if anybody is interested in looking at the Liberty Township map that shows these schools and their locations afterwards, I do have that, and we can spread it out, and you can see. In the fall of 1953, you may change that, Olentangy High School opened, and it consolidated Powell, Berlin, Orange, and Hyatts high schools. However, the Hyatts School continued to serve the younger members of the community until it was closed in 1973 and eventually was raised in 1976. So you'll see that we have a one-room school up here, and then these 4 high schools that consolidated to make Olentangy High School number 1. We now have 4, you know, and that is over on Shanahan Road, Scott Shanahan. Okay, you may, another one now. Upon the raising of the school, the community banded together and they purchased the property from the Olentangy Board of Education for $20,000 in 1982, I should say. It's now the home of Hyatts Community Park, featuring a shelter house, playground, baseball and soccer fields, and prominently displayed is the engraved Hyatts School cornerstone, 1915. Have a little funny about that. And you can't believe everything you read or hear. And it was, some said 1913, but my cohort here, Alan, who really has helped develop this whole thing, took a lot of these newer pictures, and he said, 1915. I know my Roman numerals, and that's 1915. Okay, so, and we have also found that to be true in other things we've read. So Hyatts, okay, next picture, please. Hyattsville Methodist Episcopal Church was founded in March of 1883, and at that time was pastored by an F.S. Thurston. In the 1931 history that the school children wrote, they didn't even mention him, but I was given some early records, and here was this pastor asking for help to raise money to build a church, the first one. It's you know, these old records, when you find them, are really quite cool. So anyway, until a church building could be erected, the members met in the Hyatts one-room school. And then, okay, you may, the next one, please. And a site for the new church was chosen across the school, from the school on the corner, what is now known as North Liberty and Hyatts Roads. The community raised nearly $1,000 and erected the church building in 1884. $1,000 back then was, they wanted it, okay? The church offered Sunday AM and PM services, Sunday school, Epworth League, which was for the youth, and Wednesday evening prayer services. And some of the early ministers included a Reverend Nayers, I don't know that name, and a Reverend Shoup. Anybody ever heard of either of those two? Okay, long ago. Next one. Oh, wait a minute. The Hyatts Methodist Church members disbanded and sold the building to Ohio Bible Fellowship Chapel in 2010. Okay. In 1994, and I'll butcher this, the Bharatiya, I'm not sure, Hindu temple was built at 3671 Hyatts Road, and it is recognized with an Ohio historical marker, which was the first such marker placed in Liberty Township. Okay? All right, next one, please. This is where my report kind of breaks down because I wanted to talk about the stores. And there was information about the stores that I found here and there without much help in knowing exactly where they were pinpointed, where they actually sat. And sometimes I think there were later people mentioned before the earlier people. So as timeline goes, I'm not real sure of some of these facts, but I do know that the first store was built by Mr. Hyatt as part of the depot, located on the east, west, we don't know which side of the tracks. Early merchants were Ed Knowles, who ran a store on the corner of Main Street and Tradesman Avenue. And this store was later run by Henry Cook when Knowles began operating out of Mr. Hyatt's store at the depot. And Cook sold the corner store to a Sam Mason. And by the turn of the century, it was Mackey's Meat Shop. Mr. Hyatt's original store was eventually sold to an Ed Wells, followed by a Mr. McLeod in 1886, next to Mr. Allen, been told. And by 1916, it was known as Williamson's General Store. Got all that right? Oh, that's good. Okay. Mr. Hyatt opened a second store and a grain mill on lot number 47 of his town addition. So that's on the west side, and the lot number 47 is where the two-story brick house that he built, that we know for sure where he lived, is standing today. And we do know my husband grew up there, and when they came, some of the buildings that were out by the road were still there. They actually took them down. So Mr. Hyatt opened that second one on his addition. The property, including the house, was later sold to a C.W. Bethard. Don't know if anybody remembers that name. And he ran the grocery dry goods store and a feed mill, which Hyatt had built there. And other operators of the store were Mr. McCleary, again, that name, Mr. Keys, Mr. Williamson, I think that's, yeah, the Williamson you were talking about, Mr. Davis, and E.O. Phillips. Now, Phillips bought the property from Bethard after Hyatts was gone, Mr. Hyatts was gone, and Phillips ran the feed elevator until 1942. Anybody remember hearing about that? No? Okay. Okay, next one, please. From 1945 to 1968, Jesse Brown Dennis operated. Okay, confession time. We didn't have any pictures of Hyatt stores. This is Powell.
Oh.
we just kind of sneaked that in as a representative. Just a little. Well, Mr. Hack operated the store for 35 years until 1970. And Mr. Lewis Jones and his wife Bessie, I'm talking about Joneses, they operated a store beside the school on the east side of Liberty Road from the 1950s to the 1970s. And it's also reported that a barbershop was run by Fats Rutherford, where a haircut could be procured for 25 cents. Okay? Next one, please. All right. Well, the early town also consisted of the Improved Order of Redmond's Lodge, and it was established in 1888 and was housed in an old store by the barber shop. Perhaps Hefner Hall, they said. Well, the present Lodge Hall, north of the church at 5968 North Liberty Road, was built in 1905. So this is not the original Lodge Hall, but the Lodge Hall that's been there for many, many years. And you mean next one, please. The ground floor, it said, housed the following merchants. So like ours here in Powell, the meetings were upstairs a lot of times, and their merchants were had a store below. And I had names like I.E. Hardin, L.H. Cullens, William Smith, Hugh Collins, John Chapman, H.D. Pond, Marshall Rutherford, and John Taylor. I don't know if you know any of those names at all. I see some that do. Okay. And it's reported, that's okay, get that. It's reported, this is really funny. It's reported that there was a hardware, oh, forget it. Don't worry about that. That there was a hardware across from the store, a shoe shop, a cooper, Banner Pool's blacksmith shop, and a hack service run by Miles Standish. Of dubious importance to the town's character and welfare, it is mentioned that in 1879, a saloon was run by J.C. Lowry, followed by saloons run by Sam Hessen, Ambrose Blinn, and Matt Hefner, and cockfights were well attended until 1886. Next one, please. All right. In 1850, the road, this was interesting to me, from Powell to what would become known as Hyattsville was simply a trail, and it was considered a mud road in 1879. But the 1875 plat of Hyattsville lists the road running north and south as Delaware Street. The road directly north of Hyattsville was constructed from the dirt dug from the railroad ponds. And it was piked or designated as a turnpike in 1904. The east-west road that we know today as Hyatts Road, was laid out in 1875, of course, about the same time that the town started. And in 1882, the county commissioners were petitioned to construct a gravel road from the southern county line in Powell, which is down that way, all the way up to Hyatts, which is a 5-mile stretch. And it dog-legged, which means it turned west and then started north again at Home Road, which at that time was called Lewis Center and White Sulphur Springs Road. Mm-hmm. So this road ran beside the property of Wells Andrews. And so it then resumed its northerly direction to Hyatts, and the new road, graded and stoned, was called the Andrews Stone Road. And we do see that on some maps. And of course, that's Liberty Road now. Okay, next one, please. By 1930, the original railroad company had become the Chesapeake and Ohio line, and the name of the station was shortened to Hyatts Station. Also in the 1930s and 40s, Hyatts had a cattle chute, which loaded horses and cattle, which was maintained by the White Star Farm, later known as Marycrest Farm, and presently owned by Greif Brothers Corporation on Chapman Road. That was a very important area over there because that was also exactly where the very first family in 1801 came to start settling in this area. A coal yard was operated by John Taylor, and it should be noted that Fred Hack and John Taylor were telegraph operators, along with Mr. Hyatt at one time or the other. And the depot was raised in 1940 because the passenger and shipping services ended in the 1950s. So you won't see any trace of the depot, whether it was on the right side or the left side of the tracks, the east or the west. So next one, please. There were 3 doctors are listed, I should say, as having lived in and served the community throughout its history. They were Dr. Charles F. Talley from 1886 to 1896. He lived there, and there's a picture of him, that picture, in fact, on our wall because he also was a doctor here in our town later on. He even later went into politics and was something with the state. I don't even remember what, but anyways. There was a Dr. Doran C. Hughes and a Dr. Stevens. I don't know if you remember any of those names, but I bet you remember Talley. Okay, all right. Next one, please. The Hyatts post office was discontinued and removed to the Powell post office when the rural free delivery started. And Mr. Dennison is listed as the first mailman on the river route, and I believe this is wrong. It says Route 8. I think it was Route 1 from everything that I've always heard and read in other places. So I don't know that that is correct. But anyway, moved to Powell in 1908, and there was a Mr. Corder that also was a mail delivery man. Now Larry Doolin here's father and mother worked in the Powell post office for years, and they were our mailmen. Okay, next one, please. And we'll have several of these. Presently, the old railroad pond east of the tracks that met the need of the steam train engines so well in bygone era has been renewed and renovated. Aren't we supposed to do that? Renew, reuse, and all that. As a lovely setting for a new event center named Swan Lake. You want to show some more pictures of that? Just recently opened. Pond is never more beautiful. My husband and his family played in that pond, fished in that pond, threw stones in the pond, iced on the pond, ice skated on the pond. Yep, walk down and play in the pond. Okay, the town's name of Hyattville, Hyattsville, Hyatt Station, or Hyatts was the Hyattsville business was dropped and shortened to Hyatts by the railroad company, and so it remains today. Okay, so who was this man, with the vision of founding a railroad town? I don't have a picture of him, but this Henry A. Hyatt. Just like Asa Gordon Hall here in southern Liberty Township, the founder of Powell, Mr. Hyatt saw the importance of the railroad line to the settlement of a northern section of the township. Okay, so Henry A. Hyatt was born. He was born to John and Catherine McKenzie Hyatt on August 4th, 1832 in Knox County, Ohio. And at the age of 9, after his father's death in 1839, his mother bound him out to a farmer. She had 8 children, other children to care for. He had an older brother. I don't know if he was bound out too, but wouldn't be too surprised. And he returned to her 5 years later at the age of 14. In 1857, he married Naomi Mitchell, but their life together was short. Naomi died 2 years later, They had no children. Next one, please. Henry came to Liberty Township in 1861, where he had purchased 117.5 acres from Henry Clark. At the same time, his brother, the older brother by a year, Joseph Hyatt, also purchased 50 acres from Mr. Clark. And an 1860s township map indicates the Hyatt property where the future town of Hyatts would be founded. In 1863, he married Emma Boardman, and she was a local, her father having been one of the early pioneers to Liberty Township. 3 children were born to them, Euphrasia, whom they called Dolly, and by the way, it is Dolly on the gravestone, and she was born in 1866. Charlie came along 2 years later, and Orland was born in 1877. Again, he was the founder of Hyatts. He was the station agent, the grain merchant, the postmaster, and the justice of the peace, which I hadn't mentioned before. Okay, next one, please. In 1875, he sold part of his farmland in Liberty Township, laid out the plan for the town. I imagine he needed some capital. And so the plat was recorded, as we had seen, on May 8th of 1876, and all these various things that he became as the founder. In 1879, Mr. Hyatt expanded the town, as I mentioned before, with 15 more quarter-acre lots and 3 outlots on the west side of the railroad tracks. And this addition was also recorded in 1879. It's thought that his first home was built on Lot 32 in the first part of his town. However, okay, next one. Hyatt eventually built a large 2-story brick house west of the railroad tracks on Lot 47. And on this property, he also built that feed mill west of his home by the road. And it should be noted that since 1863, we always wondered, did they dig the basement and fire the bricks right there to build the house? Because sometimes they used to do that. But I found out that even in 1863, there was a man by the name of Swan Rollison, and he had a brickyard at his farm in the area. And his Henry Rollison, I don't know if his brother or what, ran a sawmill across from the depot. And a Christian Engel had a shingle shop north of the school. So there were building supplies in the area, which I was kind of surprised about that early. I don't know why, they had to build their things, but anyway. Okay, next one, please. Mrs. Emma Hyatt was evidently a very compassionate lady, as it is told that she took in and raised George Kermode, who was an orphaned boy. And he came to Hyatts from Delphus, Ohio, at the age of 12 years with a badly mangled hand. Now, he became like a son to her. And when you check those dates, he came into their family before their first child was born. And when he married, they gave him, and the family, they gave him property adjoining lot number 47. Penny, Penny Kermode, says they think it was 99 acres that was given to him upon his wedding in 1877 to Anna Elizabeth Warren, or Warner, whichever it was, as a wedding gift. And this property remains in the Kermode family yet today. Next one, please. By 1911, Mr. Hyatt has left the town of Hyatts, and he was living in Columbus at his son's home. His wife was still living, and this one son, but Charlie and Dolly had already died. He died there on February the 3rd, 1911, at the age of 79 years of age, from heart failure. And I would like to read you the obituary of this founder of this town. it's short. And it's from the Delaware Gazette, February 7th, 1911. The remains of Henry A. Hyatt, the founder of Hyattsville, who died at the home of his son Orland S. Hyatt in Columbus Wednesday, were brought here for interment in Oak Grove Cemetery. Mr. Hyatt was 82. No, he wasn't. He was 79. Anyway, years of age, and death was due to a heart attack. He was married in 1862. I believe the record says 63. To Miss Emma Boardman, and to them were born 2 sons and a daughter, 1 surviving son. Now, Stan and I went to Oak Grove, and we found the grave. We knew where to look for it. It's in Myrtle Square. We found that. And we found this monument. Emma, Dolly, and Charles. No mention of Henry A., the founder. There is behind this, there's a chopped up 2 little tiny ones. One says mother, one says father. I'm assuming father is Henry A. And just beyond, you can see a bit of the corner right behind there is Orland's. But there's no grand monument to the founder of Hyattsville. And in fact, the next section over, there's a beautiful big Hyatt one. And I said to Alan when we were putting this together, I'd really like to use that one, but it's the wrong initials. So there's nothing there for him that mentions him. I will read you Emma's obituary from 1911. She died the same year. He had died in February. She died in November, late November. She was considerably younger. But anyway, it says Mrs. Emma O. Hyatt, who died at her sister's, Mrs. Charles Stites, in Columbus, November 30th, 1911, at the age of 65, and whose funeral services and burial took place in Delaware on December 2nd, 1911, was a native of Liberty Township, born in 1843, not far from Hyattsville. She was a daughter of Charles Boardman, a pioneer to that township. In 1855-6, listen to this, she was a pupil in school taught by your correspondent in a primitive log cabin in the John Clark Woods. In the late fall, she married Henry Hyatt, who founded Hyattsville and was the first station agent for the Hocking Valley Railroad. And by this marriage, 3 children were born, a daughter who died in early adulthood, and 2 sons who live in Columbus. Well, that's wrong. Only 1 son was living at that point. And Mr. Hyatt died several years ago in the West. He died that same year, and he was in Columbus. But anyway, and it's signed W.W.C. Luganville. And you know what? I didn't add some of the other stuff because he said he was her teacher at that one-room school. Dolly's obituary just says Dolly Hyatt died yesterday at the home of her grandfather, C.H. Boardman, and a funeral occurs today. Charlie's says Mr. Charlie Hyatt, formerly of Hyattsville, a Hocking Valley engineer, died at his home in Columbus after an illness of 1 week. His wife, parents, and 1 brother survive him. He is a cousin of Mr. William Rudder of Delaware. And then Orland died in 1917, not really very long, 6 years later. And it just says, I don't have his. But at any rate, so there you have it on the town and the man. And if you're not too bored, there's about a 10-minute little thing that we can play for you. It's a recording of my father-in-law talking about the Hyatt house. And then there are cookies. We're sitting here today with Craig Carmichael, who lives in Hyatts, actually in the Hyatt house, the gentleman that started Hyattsville. And we have some questions to ask him about this grand old house. So, Craig, when did you move to Hyatts? What year?
April the 1st, 1956.
And where did you live before you came to Hyatts?
We lived in Columbus, across from the Hubbard Avenue Grade School on 861 Kleiner Avenue.
And you were going to school on the GI Bill, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that's why you went to the Columbus area.
And that's why, yes.
In talking about going to Hyatts, how did you find the house in Hyatts?
Well, here's what prompted the movement to Hyatts. When Louise and I moved to 861 Kleiner, we were a family of 4. While we were there, we had 3 more children, and it was only a 2-bedroom house, and we needed a bigger house. So we were watching the ads for quite some time. So we were looking for a place outside the city, preferably in the country, where we could have room for the kids to run and that sort of thing. And we saw this ad in the Columbus Dispatch advertising this home in Hyatts. And it gave the phone number and the name of the man. And I called him immediately. He said, I would like to have a down payment to secure the property. I said, you know, I can't even give you the money for a down payment right now. I said, how about if I give you my shotgun, which is a brand new shotgun I just bought a year ago. It's worth $65. He said, okay. And we looked at the place, and it was pretty run down. In fact, it had been sitting empty for 3 years, and part of the roof had blown off since the previous occupant, Dixon, had moved out. But he had improved the house. He had put in plumbing. Before that, there was no indoor plumbing or anything else, and had drilled a well. And so all it needed was a little fixing up to move into it. So we looked at the property, and we fell in love with it because of its size. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs and 4 nice rooms downstairs, plus a pantry and an out mud room for in the basement there. And it was just what we needed. The only possible drawback was it located next to the C&O railroad track. But we didn't mind that too much. We lived there and heard enough trains, and so we became accustomed to the idea of the trains. In fact, the kids liked the idea of the trains, like I've explained before. Living here this close to the railroad track, which is a stone's throw from the back porch, to most adults, it was kind of a loud nuisance. But the kids, was exciting to stand on the back porch and wave to the engineers of these diesels that they came through the crossing right across the street from us. And they thought it was a big deal living quite close to the tracks. But we soon became accustomed to the trains.
Are you aware, Craig, that the railroad is the reason that this house was built and this whole town came into being?
I wasn't told that in so many words, but I kind of figured that out because knowing what a rural country was like in those days, and that the railroad was the kind of hub around which the towns were built. So I kind of suspected that, but I never actually saw it in writing.
So you are living in H.A. Hyatt's home, who started the town in 1876 because the railroad was coming through. So did you have any prior knowledge to the fact that you were moving into such an historical building?
Yes, I did have. I had an inkling about that because I read that when I got my title deed of the house. It explained a few things in there about Mr. Hyatts and to whom he bequeathed property at his death or near his death in later years. Yes, I knew some of those things, but not in great detail.
Well, this is a large 2-story brick house. Do you think that they made the brick here on site when they dug the basement?
It's very possible, because if you dig down about 6 inches under most of this ground around here, it's nothing but yellow clay. And it's very possible that they did use a lot of the ground right here next door.
Were there other buildings on the property?
Yes, there was a garage with an attached shed. In the rear of the building, there had once been a stable and a roofed part of the stable facing over toward commodes. But I don't know. I think the former owner was here. I think he may have had a horse. I don't know. I never got any affirmation one way or another on that. But it was evident that there had been a stable there. I used that old building, which was a garage and had at one time a workshop and attached and a few other things, and room for storage above the roof and that sort of thing. The brick building out in front, I measured it off one time. It was 24 feet wide and 60 feet long. And the high end was up here on the side of the railroad track, and the roof sloped to the back, all one roof and one slope. That old building, in some ways I wish I'd saved it, just simply because it was part of the property and the history. But up above there was a ceiling that ran the full length of the building. In the front of the building there was some windows and a main door to the room, and one time it was a grocery store. And on both sides of the entrance there, back at least probably halfway the length of the building, there were cabinets and shelves of all kinds in there. And I learned later that from one of the residents that said, "Oh yeah, that was so-and-so's grocery store in there." It was again built just like this house, 3 layers of brick. And it was higher in the east end and sloped toward the west. And at one time, somebody told me that they even parked a school bus in the one end of it.
Oh, it was that large. It was that large that a school bus could be parked in there?
And it didn't begin to take up the whole full length of the building.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, no. But I don't know how long or who the driver was. But then in behind that, though, when we moved in, there had been a platform behind that building so that you could bring a truck up here. There was a mill during part of that time sometime after the grocery store moved out. Somebody had a mill in there. Now, I don't know how they operated the mill, but somebody told me there was a mill in that rear part of the building at least. And on the rear part, for about 12 feet out, at least that far, there were concrete columns about 1 foot in diameter, spaced about 4 feet apart, and there must have been 8 or 10 of them. And on top of that, those pillars, the reason they had those pillars in the ground stuck up about 3 feet above ground, they had a platform up there so they could unload stuff right off the tailgate of a truck without lifting them up and getting them back on this higher platform. And apparently then, whoever operated the mill took whatever they were bringing up here and ground it for them, and you know whatever they do in a mill. But that part of it I've never been able to verify. I don't know who owned the mill or during what period or anything about it. A fella came over here to visit one time, just shortly after he moved in, well, in the same year anyhow. During the summer, he came over and we got talking and we walked around the house, and he says, we came to this corner of the house right there at the corner where the basement and the other house where the dining room window is. He says there is an opening there, but under the house, and you can see the concrete slab over the doorway, what had been a doorway going down that basement. He said at one time, he says there was a stairway going down to the basement, and the reason what they did that, there was a spring in the basement. And that's what they use to keep the milk cold and stuff like that.
Well, we thank you very much, Mr. Craig Carmichael of Hyatts, Ohio, for your remembrances about the Hyatt House. That's it, folks.